the longest chapter?
Yeah.
Is it the middle one, the longest?
Okay, we're now live. Welcome everybody. Since there's no viewers, we can just say hello anyway. People join us later. There we go. Let's see who Some of the colleagues will be joining us a bit later, but we're going to kick off in the meantime anyway. Let's share the screen there.
You recovered. You recovered. You had the flu.
No, I was hospitalized
Oh.
for a whole last week.
Am I?
At least you're still alive.
Yeah, I made it.
Okay, you're just in time. We're kicking off more or less on time for a change.
Sure, I tried because I left him here 10 past.
Okay, so you made fairly good time then. Okay, so let's get the show on the road. Our agenda for this evening is fairly similar to the previous ones. So we'll do quick introductions, recap on what's expected, then we'll go through an overview of Chapter 3. Quite a lot of material in the chapter, so quite a lot to get through there. Look at some challenges, questions and answers, and then look at what it is that you need to do for next week. Okay, so I'm Justin, for those who don't know me, I know you pretty much should. MX, maybe you want to just introduce yourself to everybody, the new face amongst us.
Oh, hi guys, I'm Olisi, but popularly known as MX. I'm Deloitte and writing my exam.
Well, welcome, good to see you again.
Thank you.
Okay, the rest of us are all old hats, so we'll skip the intros there. You can go back and look at previous videos if you want. Okay, so just a quick recap. Chapter 3 is 78 pages. It's pretty much the longest of the chapters. So there's a lot of material to get through. And it is also fairly detailed, depending on where you've come from in your previous life before you get in here. It could be something that's quite foreign to you and quite strange concepts. Otherwise, it could be something that's quite familiar to you. So I think different people will handle it in different ways. So as per normal, make notes of things that you don't understand, note down concepts that you have problems with, add it to a list, bring it, we can discuss it and go through it. Okay, and then as normal, try and do some questions. Questions are always what's going to help consolidate the learnings and the knowledge. Okay, so yeah, that's pretty much what was expected then in terms of the prep material beforehand. The provisional schedule is still unchanged. We still need to confirm what days we want to do Saturday sessions on. I think we've not got yet to a point of saying this is the date, and I think we probably need to do that fairly soon. One of the viewers who's been following online on the YouTube channel asked if we can move that final exam techniques session a little bit earlier. He was concerned that that session is 4 days before the exam, and that it might be too late to take those exam techniques and change them and practice them. So yeah, we could potentially swap things around. So we could either do it on the 26th or do it before with the sample exam, or let's just see how to kind of do it there. I think it does make sense to do it a little bit earlier, and we can just do a recap then on that day along with anything else that's worrying people. But yeah, I'm open around it. I'm not too fussed when we do that.
Tuesday, second. All these are the normal Tuesday sessions.
Yeah, those are all the normal Tuesday sessions. And we purposely left a few towards the end there to do revision, do the mock exam, sort out any last minute issues, do exam techniques and that kind of stuff.
Probably that, like, as of finale, I'd recommend maybe a week, the weekend before this, like that Saturday or so, maybe a 4 session there. And like in the next 2 weeks or so, this April, the long weekend is coming up, so maybe not
Once the long
then.
weekends are done.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So maybe not then, but after the long weekend might be a bit late.
Bit late because it's really late.
So maybe like just before the long weekend or so,
Yeah.
somewhere around there.
So which kind of days
this
are you looking
weekend
at
or
there?
next weekend probably. So maybe the 11th. This weekend is 16th, Saturday the 16th.
So you're kind of looking at maybe there between the 21st and 28th.
And then the other option is Saturday the 23rd. So that's like one weekend session we can do there.
23rd of May.
Okay, I'm looking at the wrong date. Sorry. Okay, so
That's a Thursday.
today is the 16th. So 18th is this Saturday, and then
2 months.
the 20,
Yesterday.
27th is a Monday, so that's a long weekend. If people are open to it, maybe we can.
So when you're looking at doing, sorry, the 20?
It's already different.
Either this weekend, which is Saturday the 18th, or next Saturday, which is the 24th.
Okay, so maybe 25th gives people a bit more time to kind of get used to it. So 25th of April, how's that sounding? Saturday the 25th.
I'm actually not here, but.
Okay.
Eh? Oh, you also it's a long weekend.
Okay. Is that a long weekend?
Yeah,
The
Yeah.
27th, Monday is a public
okay.
holiday, yeah.
and the next
And then the next
Friday,
yeah,
Saturday,
that's-
Sunday.
This is a devotion so on the Friday.
Yes. What is Saturday?
It's on the Friday the 1st.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm here that
So the
weekend.
2nd, how's the 2nd of May
Yeah, okay.
looking then?
I don't know, I'm very much left behind, so.
We still would like to include you on all of that, but then we can use that time to catch up.
Because I know that I won't be. like,
Basically,
covered over-
Not going through content, doing like question and answers and stuff like that.
Covering the whole domains.
Covering
Maybe
everything
what
that we've covered up to
done
that
so far,
point.
yeah.
So if we're looking at doing that like on the
It's a
2nd
jumble
of
of
May,
fish.
by the 2nd of May, we should have covered even the first half of chapter 4. So we could do
Maybe
questions
chapter 4.
for the first 4 chapters. We could do, if we did it on the 2nd.
Obviously, double push myself because I've been in the hospital for the past 4 weeks. So.
Yeah, no, we understand that.
And my work as well, so.
Yeah, I haven't.
But I'll try to push myself.
This is how much I read.
No,
I'm being
I
honest.
read chapter 3, I don't want to lie.
That's fine.
Well, yeah, should we say provisional for that 2nd?
Okay, so what we'll do then.
We can discuss it in next week's session again.
Let's see how
Yeah, that's a good day.
That's one.
I'll get a 5K. I haven't registered, but you registered on the day for the 5K. Yeah. And did you register? Yep. For 21. For 5K, if you feel like you can sign up on the day, you just go there. Yeah. But everything else, I think the registrations are closed. It's at the 10th. Yeah, it's at the 10th. I haven't registered for the 5K, but I'm just going to go. And if I'm really not, I'll just do it, even if I walk up. I know, no, but I want to do it because it's like, I want to be part of this.
I'm not sure why this thing's not letting me.
I think we got some fun.
And then the weekend before the exam is the 6th of June. Maybe that'll be a good day.
I'm booking myself out for that weekend just to study.
Right, so just see where we can just insert it.
scary how quickly time goes.
Mm.
It's so much time. And before you know it, it's Tuesday again.
Time is just like sure. Before you know it, one Friday is coming and the year is gone.
I need to read all those long weekends.
If I can next one weekend, I can away.
Yeah, but if I'm driving, I can read them like it's more I'm in the car.
Get emotional.
But do you get emotional?
Yeah, yeah.
So I'll
Okay, and then you wanted it
So
here.
it's either
So I
the
can try.
30th of May or the
I should have some.
6th of June.
So 6th of June is there before the final.
Yeah, that's the Saturday before the final, and the
Okay.
30th of May is 2 weeks before the
So
final.
6th of June.
Yeah.
Okay, what are we going to call this session?
It's also extra
Extra question, extra Q&A.
Q&A recap. So that's exactly 1 week.
Okay, so I'll put those in later, but tentatively that's what we're looking at then. Okay, that's looking fine then.
But I hate doing stuff like this.
Cool. Okay, that's fine then.
So that's the
So we're then looking at 2nd of May for extra study session and 6th of June for extra Q&A.
and that'll be like a Saturday morning or
Yeah, we can everybody just check diaries, confirm that that's all okay, and then we can do that. Okay,
the 6th of June and
the 2nd of May.
6th of June.
And 2nd of May.
Yeah.
You know, it's 3 questions like all jumbled together because I've just been doing them per chapter.
Yeah.
Cover
The
the
master
cover the I'm gonna leave this chapter.
So you can do it per chapter.
Yeah, I've been doing the question per chapter. Then I think, well, I think I should probably just start including each so you still get the other ones.
Yeah, we can do that.
Actually, I'll start.
Because by the end of it, you want to have done all the questions. So it doesn't really matter when you do it in terms of the order, as long as you do them all. And there are a lot of them.
That database gives you, like, in your exam database, gives you how many hours you need to cover everything. I just don't look at it.
It says like 2 hours.
Yeah.
2 hours per day or something.
4. If you
Every
can
day,
tick
if
for
I
days.
study every day.
Oh, really?
So,
I think I only tick like every single day. So I think I need to tick every day.
Okay, so chapter 3, as we said earlier, 78 pages, 19% of the exam. It's the least amount of marks per page out of any of the chapters. So although it's the longest chapter, you don't have to know it almost as well as some of the other chapters. Okay, but it's still worth 19% of the exam, so you can't discount it. You still need to know what it's all about. And I think we've also had quite a few questions in other chapters that relate back to this chapter. So everything's interrelated. We can't ignore anything and say, I'm only going to spot this chapter or leave that chapter out. It will definitely compromise you in questions on other chapters if that's the case. Okay. So if we get into the actual chapter itself, we have 6 task statements for this chapter, which is not very many compared to some of the other chapters and compared to the length of the chapter. Okay. And if we look at those task statements, then it gives us quite a good indication of what the chapter is all about. So if we just go through them quickly, the first one is evaluate the business case for the proposed investments in information systems acquisition, development, maintenance, and subsequent retirement to determine whether it meets business objectives. Okay. So quite a mouthful in there. And starts with the business case, which is very important. Anything to do with any new system or acquisition or development always starts with a business case, because that's what decides what value you're going to get from it, whether it's worth doing it, and make sure that it aligns to a business need. Anything you're doing without a business case is a problem. And you'll find generally that immature IT organizations don't have a business case for a large majority of things that they've done. And that's when you end up with things being cancelled halfway through, or losing focus and not knowing why you're doing it anymore, and problems arising. If you start with a solid business case, then it's less likely that those things will happen. Okay?
Business case.
Sorry?
Well, sounds very stupid. What is a business case?
So the business case will look at things like, why are you doing this? What are the business objectives? What do you need to achieve? Okay, and it'll then look at perhaps what alternates are there in the market. What's the cost of different alternates? What are the benefits of each? Gives you that cost benefit. Normally, you also
really need to do it?
It's like your initial phase, basically, like your due diligence.
Is it even before the planning? Because
it is before the
Yeah.
planning.
It's like, do we actually need this? Is it really worth it?
It's like sort of part of planning as well.
It's kind of a pre-planning.
Yeah.
Because you may not even, if they find it's not worth it, they may
They
not.
probably won't.
Yeah.
May not go forward to planning. Yeah. And you've got to identify at that stage things like who's your business sponsor. Okay. And then are you going to actually get budget for this thing? Are you going to get enough budget to do it all and do it properly?
Is it even worth it?
Yeah, and then up front in the business case, you normally start to identify what value is this thing going to give to the business. Okay, so that's part of this whole value realization concept. Okay, so we say that the value to the business is going to be, we're going to get 100,000 rands worth of savings. We're going to be able to make it 2 times more efficient to process a help desk application or whatever it might be, and you normally document those things. And what you're supposed to do is right at the end of the project, loop back and say, well, here's what I said in terms of the benefits to the business. Now, am I actually getting these benefits? No, well, I'm not. I didn't save any money. The project overran and cost double, so now I'm actually wasting money. Okay, that's not working so well. No, it's actually not being quicker to process an application because the application is very slow. Okay, well, then we need to fix the application, otherwise we're never going to realize those benefits, and then go and do some extra stuff so that you can actually realize them. But too many people in the business case like vague stuff. You know, we're putting this new 5th generation application, and therefore it must be more efficient and it must be faster. Well, how and how much? And how's that going to save us money? How's that going to pay for it? People don't like to answer those kinds of questions. So you almost need to document those business benefits in such a way that you can actually come back and audit them later. So they need to be tangible things, not very kind of up in the air vague stuff. Okay. Okay, so the second task statement is we need to be able to evaluate the project management practices and controls to determine whether business requirements are achieved in a cost-effective manner while managing risks to the organization. Okay. So again, quite a mouthful in there. So really about the project management now. So now it's taking those business cases and how do we manage that as a project to actually get it implemented in a way that's cost-effective. Because projects also have that tendency to overrun, go over budget, and just blow up and become these huge things, which are, you know, and you have to be careful as well. You might have a small little project, and now you manage that thing to death, and you have 5 project management staff to 1 little developer trying to get something done, and that can also be a huge problem. Okay. Item 3.3, conduct reviews to determine whether a project is progressing in accordance with the project plan, is adequately supported by documentation, and status reporting is accurate. Okay, so that's also critically important. Few projects are really short. You know, if a project's 3 weeks or a month, then it's not such a big deal. But if a project's going to go on for 18 months, 2 years, and it's part of, you know, a multi-phase project and there's other interdependencies, then you need to know that that project is going along in accordance with those plans. And you need to know that the information that you're getting back when you look at those status reports is accurate. Far too often, it's too easy for a project manager or somebody to just put green, 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 green. And when you actually start to drill down, you know, this section of the project is a month behind, that one's behind, this thing's behind, and yet they're ticking everything as though it's all green. And then you get to a week before the end of the project, and suddenly, oh heck, we're halfway through the project only, but we've only got a week to finish all this. This is not possible. Now suddenly we change everything to red. And then you have to ask, well, you know, how in a week can everything go from green to red? That's not possible. So that's why you need somebody objective to be able to just look at those and just make sure that there's integrity in the process. And the other thing is, a lot of project managers also end up being there on short-term contracts with short-term incentives. Okay? Now that can be dangerous. The project manager knows that their contract is up in, you know, a month's time, and they've got no intention of renewing that contract. They're just going to put green, green, green all over the place, you know, and then they're out of there, and it's somebody else's problem. Okay? And then the next guy's just blame the previous project manager, which is fine, but it doesn't actually help the organization in terms of dealing with these things. Okay. 3.4, evaluate controls for information systems during the requirements, acquisition, development, and testing phases for compliance with the organization's policy, standards, procedures, and applicable external requirements. Okay. So now this is looking at, we've got these acquisition and development and testing phases for this new application. Okay. That all has to be done in accordance with the organization's policies and standards. And right up front in all of this, you need to look at the policies and standards and say, well, what does this application need to be able to do in order to be compliant? Once you've bought this thing or you've built this thing, and then you're starting to say, well, actually, hang on, is it compliant? Let's go look, see, oh, no, it's not compliant here, it's not compliant there. It's largely too late. Okay? It's so difficult to try and fix something post-fact. And then what happens is, oh no, oops, you know, it's too late. No, we're going to have the system for 5 years. Now we must live with it. So we're going to have this exception, and we'll write and sign this deviation. We'll accept the risk, all that kind of nonsense that you hear all the time. It's because somebody messed up. It should have been correct from the start. But it means that right up front, even when you kind of have your business case and you start having your business requirements definition and all of that, you need to be starting to map it out to say, hey, you know what, there's encryption involved in this thing, or there's authentication involved, or it's a new platform, or whatever it is, and start to look for the policies and standards and configuration standards and all those things, and get it all aligned right up front. And yes, it's going to make your project take a little bit longer to implement, but you're going to get something that's going to be right from the start. 3.5, evaluate the readiness of information systems for implementation and migration into production to determine whether project deliverables, controls, and organization requirements are met. That's another big thing that happens, is that, you know, there's always this drive and this push to, this thing must go live on time, it must go live on time. And a few people have the courage to kind of stand up and say, well, actually, you know what, I hear all of that, I understand all of that, and I know we're going to make a loss if we don't put this thing in on time, but we're just not ready. And the risk to the business of putting this thing in is too great, and we can't do that. So we need to stop this bus and delay it by a week or 2 or 3. And then what happens? You put it in, it goes wrong, and it takes even more effort to now try and unravel all of this, because now you've got a system that's generating the wrong results. Business maybe can't rely on the information. It could have impact on your customers. There's all sorts of things that can go on, and you need to manage that whole lot. Okay? So normally within a project, you then have a whole lot of different project gates. Okay? And you've got QA, and you've got sign-off, and you've got all these things. Those are all in place to stop a situation where the system shouldn't be going live. Okay. Then 3.6, conduct post-implementation reviews of systems to determine whether project deliverables, controls, and organization requirements are met. Okay. So now this is right at the end. The system has gone live. It's been running for a bit. does this thing now meet the business objectives? And that's where you look back to the business case. So the business case said, this is what it should be doing for us. Is this thing actually now doing these things? Okay? And if you don't have a nicely documented business case and the value realization documentation is not in place, it can be incredibly difficult to actually now say, well, yes, it's meeting, or no, it's not. And especially if there have been lots of changes in personnel along the way. So, yeah, and it also protects IT if they have all those things documented. Business along the way can change their mind. Now they can get to the end of it, IT's done everything that business said they want. Now business is deciding this is not really what they wanted anymore, and it's all IT's fault. And, and it's not meeting the business requirements, but then you can look back and say, well, actually, look, here's what was documented, here's what was specified, here's what we've delivered, and yeah, it does all that. Okay, but yeah, okay, the competitors have moved on, and now we need to do things smarter, faster, different, online, mobile, cloud, whatever. That's fine. We can do that as a part B, phase C, whatever it might be. But yes, we've delivered what was required originally. Okay. So in order to be able to achieve those tasks, now we need certain knowledge, and that's where our knowledge statements come in. So now we've got 14 knowledge statements. In the previous chapters, it was almost like a one-to-one between the tasks and the knowledge. Now it's a little different. Okay. So the first of those knowledge statements says we need knowledge of benefits realization practices. Okay. So you see benefits realization comes up a lot. And it's not just a vague term, it's something that's critically important in any mature organization to make sure that IT delivers value to the business. So what do we mean by benefits realization practices? Well, it's things like feasibility studies. It's those business cases. It's looking at total cost of ownership and return on investment. Okay? So it's important to know those concepts and what they mean. A badly written business case is the same as having no business case. Okay? We need project governance mechanisms. So those project steering committees, the project oversight board, project management office. Okay? If those aren't in place, then you're not going to have smooth running projects. You're not going to get accurate reporting and information coming through. Project management control frameworks, practices, and tools. There's a lot of checklists and things that are needed within those project management offices. And it's not always about putting millions of controls in place. It's about having the right controls in place for the right size of project. So it's equally important to have some kind of small project methodology as it is to have a big project methodology. Because if you don't have that small project methodology, you're going to have people all over the place saying, well, no, this project's too small, we can't have a project manager, we can't do this. We're not going to call it a project. Now we're going to call it an initiative or a task or something else. And then you're going to have absolutely no governance around it. Whereas if you have a small project methodology, even if the guy who's actually writing the code is doing those project management tasks, you can still then have some level of governance and reporting in place. Okay. Risk management practices applied to projects. All projects come across risk, whether it's project risk directly or it's business risk impacting it or some external factor. Every project must have a risk register and must have an issues log. Okay, those things need to be kept up to date, and action needs to be taken to address those risks as you go through it. So they need to understand all of that, and we need to understand that. Okay. 3.5, IT architecture related to data applications and technology. Well, projects can be pretty darn complicated, and we've got to make sure that we have the right architecture in place and the right foundations in place. So we need to understand all of those things, and somebody within the project environment also needs to understand all of those things. Acquisition practices. Well, somewhere along the line we're going to be buying technology or full applications or whatever it might be. So we need to make sure that we can do those things and do it properly, and that we know how to contract for it, we know what we're getting, and we'll make sure we get what it is that we want. So that's where you've got, how do you put together your business requirements? How do you evaluate tenders against that requirement? How do you contract with the vendor? How do you manage them afterwards? How do you put in place escrow agreements so that if they go bust, you've got access to the source code and you can get somebody else to take it over for you? So all of those considerations need to be in place. 3.7, requirements analysis and management practices. Business requirements analysis is not an easy thing. Everybody thinks they can do it. but to do it properly in a way that you can actually then translate that into some kind of tender, that you can then translate that into some kind of evaluation, that you can actually then do an evaluation and get the right products coming out at the end of it, is not so easy. So you need experienced people doing that so you get the right outcomes. Okay. So there they talk about things like requirements verification. How do we actually check it back to the business? Okay. Traceability. Do we know where it goes from the business process right through to those requirements? Gap analysis. Where are they now? What do they want? Are they asking for stuff based on some kind of future nirvana, or is this a reality of what they already need right now? Vulnerability management, security requirements, there's all sorts of things that have to go in there. And the more accurate we get those up front, the better the product will get coming out at the end of it. Okay. Project success criteria and risks. What is it that we absolutely have to have in place for this project to be a success? What are those nice to haves? How do we make sure we focus on the right things? Okay, 3.9, control objectives and techniques that ensure the completeness, accuracy, validity, and authorization of transactions and data. If you're looking at business systems, it comes back to you've got your control objectives, and we've got transactions, we've got data, and these systems are processing that on our behalf. So we need to make sure all of that is in place. 3.10, systems development methodologies and tools, including their strengths and weaknesses. There's lots of different methodologies and practices out there. And those change over time. And, we used to have all those rapid application development, then it was object-orientated, and then it was prototyping, and then it's agile. So you've got all these different methods. Okay? And you need to, if you're auditing any of those, you need to understand what are they, how do these things work, what makes it a success or failure. And you might expect different things to be in place. And often organizations use a combination of those. They don't just use, say, agile. They say maybe this kind of project will use agile. This kind of project maybe needs to be a bit more formal, a bit more structured. So we'll use a different kind of methodology. 3.11, testing methodologies and practices. Testing is another thing that is often underestimated in size and under-scoped in that. And people don't want to test properly. And it's business people who should be doing that final user acceptance testing. And often they want to outsource it, get somebody else to come and do it, get some set of auditors or something to come and do it. And then it doesn't happen properly, and then the application gets put in, it's been signed off, it goes live, it doesn't work so nicely, and now people look for, okay, well, who tested this? Okay, we want to blame somebody. Okay? And it doesn't help you at that point. This thing is signed off and it doesn't work properly. Okay. Configuration and release management relating to the development of information systems. So once you now have an application in place, so you've got your 1.0 application, it's there, it's live, it's running, now you want some changes being made. Okay? So people are going to fill in change requests, and you're going to start working on different changes, and you're going to fix this module and that module. Now you've got to take those changes and put it into the live environment and get it out to everybody who's using it. Okay? And that can be fairly simple. It could be pretty complicated. It largely depends on the architecture that you're using. So if you've got a client-server-based environment and you're now changing the client application, and now you've got to roll it out to every desktop or system out there that's now making use of the client. And are those distributed across the country, or they're sitting all in one office? Are they getting the application off a server, or is it locally installed on each? All of that kind of stuff can impact it. Okay? And if you now have certain changes on the back end that need a certain version of the front end, does the back end know how to test the front end application to see that they're using the right version? And if they're not, what does it do? Does it stop the guy working? Does it allow them to do certain functions and not others? It can be pretty complicated to do these things. And if you mess it up, how quickly can you roll out the updated version? Or now you're going to bring business to a halt because now there's a bug that you didn't find in the test environment.
I think it also causes a lot of security issues. Like,
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's like people using older versions.
Yeah, for sure.
That's where a lot of like flaws.
And you see it in mobile apps. If you use WhatsApp and all of these things,
you can get around
and
certain
people
things.
want to. Some people don't like updating them, and it uses all the data to update it. So they're using all.
Yeah.
And eventually, you'll get a message saying, "Hey, sorry, your version's too old. You can't use it anymore. You have to update to a newer one."
Yeah.
Okay? And that's this kind of thing where the back end has now changed so much that it can't support all these different versions on the front end. So therefore, you have to use this certain version. Okay. And then also just from a pure manageability point of view, the fewer different versions of applications or operating systems or whatever it is that you have out in the environment, the easier it is to manage it. If you think about it, let's say you've got different standards in place. So we've got a Windows 2003 standard, then we've got a 2003 release 2, and then a 64-bit and a 32-bit. Then we've got Windows 2007, and then we've got new Windows 2012, and now there's 2015 or 16 or whatever it is. Now suddenly you've got like 7 or 8 different versions of these things. Okay? Now you decide you want to change a standard. Okay? So now you've got to go and update all these different versions of these standards to keep them all in sync. Now you've got to have tools in place which can go and measure whether these things are compliant or not. Now it needs to work across all of those. And maybe one tool doesn't work across all of it. So now you've got to have 2 or 3 different tools. The whole environment is just unnecessarily complicated. If you can keep everybody on 1 or 2 platforms at most, it's much, much easier to do. But then what will happen is that some guy will have an old application. He won't have a maintenance contract with the vendor. The vendor will tell him, no, sorry, we don't support that version. You need to buy a new version. No, I don't want to buy a new version. I don't have money for it. But now it's stuck on an old version of Windows. Now you have all these complications coming through. So all of these things get covered within these areas. Okay. 3.13. Okay. We've got system migration and infrastructure development, infrastructure deployment practices, data conversion tools, techniques, and procedures. So it's not only necessarily about applications, but also the underlying infrastructure. You want to move from a Windows 2007 to 2012 or whatever it might be. You need to look at how you're going to deal with all of those. And you're moving from an old version of application to a new one. You may be changing the database. The table structure changes. You've got to convert all your data. How are you going to validate that? How are you going to make sure you're not dropping transactions or losing any records along the way? You need to look at all of that. And then 3.14, post-implementation review objectives and practices. So project closure, when can we close a project? If we look at the whole value realization thing, a month after the project has been implemented, it's highly unlikely you're going to see all that value being realized by the business. People are still getting used to it, they haven't all been trained, there's some phase 2 that needs to be implemented. So at what point do we now go and do this value realization? And at what point do we then close the project? Can we close the project before we've done the value realization? What's the life cycle of that whole project? People will tell you that you actually have to keep the business case open until you actually remove that application from the organization. So, 5 years after you've implemented it, you should still have a business case that should still tell you, why have I got this application? What is it supposed to be doing for me? Okay. So there's different views on how you handle that. Your project managers don't want to really look at it from that point of view, but maybe your portfolio managers do, or maybe your business owner does. You've got to try and figure that all out. Okay, and then performance measurement. So what are those KPIs or measures that tell you whether this application or this business process is performing the way it should? And how do we have continuous improvement in all of that? So that's then really the knowledge statements covering all of that. So if we then move on to the actual content of the chapter, we've now covered like the first 3 pages out of those 78 pages. Now you get kind of to the meat of it. But all this is really doing is supporting all of those statements and elements. So benefits realization only gets 2 pages. But it's fairly certain that you'll get a question on benefits realization. It's the whole crux of projects. So make sure you've at least read and understood what's in there. So really, the elements they cover within those 2 pages is just your portfolio and program management, your business case development and approval, so your business cases come back into it there, and your benefits realization techniques. So how do you go about doing these things? Okay.
Sorry, just on program management, section I did read. I was battling to understand the concept of program. Do they mean like a program being developed? I think I was reading it quite late tonight.
No, so it's not code. Don't think of that as being code or an application. Okay. What they're looking at is a series of projects.
Okay.
So
program or project. So
Yeah.
it says that programs emerge from projects, yeah.
So think of it almost as being, if you're going to go to some kind of concert or something, and they're telling you, first is the...
Like an agenda.
Yeah, that's what it is. And it should help you with things like prioritization and interdependencies. We've got to do this one before we can do this one. So we only want to focus on high-value projects, but hey, you know what? We've got a new network cable that we need to install, and that's a really low-value, low-risk, but we can't do this until we've done that. Therefore, we have to do some of these lower-value projects first to enable those higher-value ones to come later.
Right.
And that you will see clearly come through on the program.
I mean, project portfolio management is like all of, them encompassed, or?
A lot of that stems from titles of people and their jobs. So,
Maybe is what I'm
a project portfolio manager might, so it depends on size of organization as well. So you might have a program manager who manages the entire program, okay? And that's made up of a whole lot of little projects. And you might group projects together to then have a project portfolio manager, okay? And then a project manager might only manage one project or a couple of small ones. Okay? And as they get more senior, so you would then move from being a junior project manager to a project manager to a program manager and then a portfolio manager, or something along those lines. Okay. So all of those things are covered then within that section of the document there. What's important also is to look at things like project communication and culture, and then your project objectives, and then roles and responsibilities. Key. So who's actually going to do what? And that's also something that often goes wrong within projects. A project manager has a hang of a job because they have to keep everything on track. They need honest feedback. They're often not technically clued up in terms of the project they're delivering. They're relying on their developers or the other staff of an area to give them this honest feedback. And if you're running a project that you don't actually technically understand, people can pull the wool over your eyes all the time. And once they realize they can do that, then it becomes free-for-all, and the project manager really suffers. And the project manager is the one who also gets blamed if things start to go wrong. So the guys on the ground are not delivering, and the project manager is getting blamed. And that's where those roles and responsibilities can help sort some of those things out. Okay, 3.4 looks more at the actual project management practices. So 3.3 was the overall structure, how you put these things together. 3.4 is actually the doing, how you go and do all this. Okay? So they then look at the different phases of projects, your initiation phase, your project planning, things like software size estimation, all the different types of functional point analysis, the features, your costs and budgeting, scheduling, establishing timeframes, critical path methodology, Gantt charts. There's a lot of terminology and stuff in there, so you need to know what all those things are. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to answer any questions on those. So it is a bit of a challenge, but somehow you're going to have to just read through and try and remember as much of the terminology as you can. Just looking there. See, estimation of sizing is a huge problem, because normally it's the project managers told to go out and put together the project plan. Okay, but it's extremely difficult for a project manager because he doesn't know whether this particular task takes 1 day or 5 days, because he's not the one who has to do the task. And then people tend to always want to overestimate or underestimate depending on their personality. That guy thinks he's brilliant and he's got to give to everybody. He's going to think that he can do everything super quick and faster than anybody else. Okay? So he's going to say, no, I can do this in 2 days and I can do this. And you're going to get the guys a little bit lazy and, he's kind of thinking, oh, you know what, if I say I can do it in 2 days, somebody's going to want to hold. So if I say I can do it in 3 days, then I can take a little bit more time and relax a bit more. So you put all those things together, and then this project that you think should take you 3 months suddenly says it's going to take 6 or 7 months. And your project sponsor comes back and says, no, we can't have it in 7 months. We've got to have it in 3 months. And then you try and cut it and push it back in there. And then if you don't size things properly, then you're going to end up with a disaster. There's a lot of skills needed from your project managers to do those things correctly. Okay, then look at the section on project controlling. Scope creep and scope changes and poor handling of scope changes is something that also kills a lot of projects. You know, project starts out and they want something simple, and then suddenly no, but we must just add this, we must just add that, we must just add the next thing. And each time you add something, cost should go up and the time should extend. But no, we must still do it within the original agreed time frame. So you can't change the time frame, but yet they want all these things. Okay, so handling that properly is critically important. And taking the, properly documenting all those scope changes, taking them back to a steering committee, getting approval for that, getting everybody on board, it must be done properly. And those things are not a project manager's decision to make. It's got to go back to the steering committee and go through our governance channels. Okay, resource usage, so getting the right people on the project, making sure you have them at the right time, making sure that you have all the interdependencies sorted out. Project manager needs to do all that. Handling risk, making sure those risk registers are up to date, that everything's dealt with, that you have owners allocated to each risk. Again, the project manager needs to manage that and make sure the right people are allocated to the tasks that you go and do the underlying work, and then he needs to get the feedback and update that documentation again. And then project closure once all of that is done. Okay, 3.5 then moves on to business application development. So you can see these sections starting to get longer and longer. So business application development is now 17 pages. So there's quite a lot in there. So the kind of traditional SDLC approach that take you through that entire life cycle. Okay. Hopefully at some point in your studies, you've done some kind of business information systems study, so you've come across some of these things before. It's not all foreign concepts to you. If it is, it can be quite tedious to have to try and learn all this stuff. So, yeah, the SDLC phase starts with feasibility. Right up front, if what you're trying to do is not feasible, don't bother. And then go through the requirements, the selection or design, development, configuration, testing, implementation, post-implementation review. So that whole cycle, just have a look at all of that. And then the different risks associated with software development. You need to understand those as well. 3.6 then, business application systems. Okay. So now they're looking at all the different kinds of systems that you can get. So the range from e-commerce to EDI, different risks associated with that, then email and security of email, your point of sale systems, electronic banking. There's many, many different kinds of systems. Okay. So we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We can just go and have a look and see what is it that's important about this. How do we deal with this? Okay. Yeah, so that section seems to go on and on and on. Yeah, we're going to have to just read through and try and remember some of it.
I think some of the concepts are different to be asked, like the different types of.
You would, but at a conceptual level. I can't see them asking like detailed detail, and I don't remember any very in-depth questions on those things.
Testing, I love asking.
Yeah.
See regression. I highlighted that it was asked. It was put in one of the options. It was types. What were they doing? And then I had regression, and it had nothing to do.
It was like sampling or something, wasn't it?
Yeah, I can't remember. And then we looked it up, and this is where it was from. Regression test. So, and it had nothing to do with the question. I just put it in there as like a.
And if you knew from this chapter what regression testing was, if it's immediate, it's a gimme, you just cross that off the list of options, and then you're down to 3. Okay. So 3.7 is then looking at the different development methods. So use of structured analysis, design, and development techniques. It's important that that happens up front. Then agile development. There's a lot of talk these days about agile. Everybody's talking about using agile. So what the heck is it? How does it work? How do you do it without risk to the business? Because one of the key points of agile is that give flexibility and freedom to your programmers, and that you're not tying them down in red tape. And you kind of pair them up with other programmers, and that they kind of check each other and all these kind of things. So you need to kind of read it and understand it, and see when can you use it and when can't you use it. And then all the other different types: prototyping, rapid application development, object orientation, component-based, web-based application development, software re-engineering, reverse engineering. Okay. Now, reverse engineering, you'll hear that term used a lot within security context, within a hacking kind of context, where people are taking somebody else's code and working backwards to get back to the logic of what it does and what it doesn't do, and how to make it do unexpected things that even the programmers didn't think it should or could do, and use that to then exploit. So that's less about a development method. But you might also have to do reverse engineering if you don't have that escrow agreement in place and you don't have the source code now. And now you've got this business application, you need to make changes and updates to it, but you don't have the source code anymore. So now you'll go through some kind of reverse engineering to come with, okay, well, what was the business logic that's embedded within this thing? So we can now write a new version of it, and the new version won't go backwards in terms of the old one, in terms of functionality point of view. So 3.8 is now looking at infrastructure development and acquisition practices, as opposed to software. Okay. So they're looking at physical architecture analysis, review of existing architecture, analysis, design, draft functional requirements, all that kind of stuff. And that could be something like, you know, building a new network or building a new server room, or doing upgrades in that space, or remote access, or anything like that. Okay. 3.9, information systems maintenance practices. So there, look at change management. Change management has to control all of this. You can't do anything in an uncontrolled manner. How do you deploy changes, document them, test them? How do you audit program changes? What do you do about emergency changes?
Sample change request. Could we like this to a client if they didn't have anything and say, this is an example of that?
Absolutely, you could.
Something they would look for. So this is the type of thing we would have.
Now, the sad thing about a lot of these forms is that when you get to a client and you look at it and you say, okay, well, can I have you change the request form? Okay, first they might not have a form. Okay, yeah. And if they do have a form, then you've got to look and say, well, have they reused this form? So let's look at some that are completed. And when they're completed, you look and say, well, is it clear which fields are compulsory fields and which are optional fields?
Yeah.
Because people just get lazy.
They do. And then, then they say, oh no, we don't need to do this because of that.
Yeah, we don't have to do testing, or we don't need a backup plan. It's like, what's the backup plan? No, well, we'll just change the setting back. Okay, and what happens if like something's going wrong now and you've got some data? How are you going to validate the data and do this and fix this and do this?
Just refreshing the field.
Yeah.
Those.
So one needs to understand very clearly what is applicable and what's not applicable, and when can you write not applicable for something. So the design of those forms can become critically important. So that's where electronic forms helps, because you can actually have workflow built into the form. If you answer this question like this, then expand this section over here, and don't move on until all those fields are answered. Okay? Paper forms can be just a...
And you have to sample them, and then they don't put them in any order.
Yes.
They just put them in as the project was completed. I'm like, well, we'll never find it.
And that's where logging everything in some kind of centralized system also helps. So a lot of people use the help desk system for that. So you...
Yeah, I like it with the help desk.
And then at least there's some kind of reference number and there's different classification types. So you can say, okay, well, give me everything that's logged in here, and let's just filter by type. Okay, so which are service desk requests and which are change requests, and which ones are infrastructure versus program, and you can then start to break those things out. And at least then you have a completeness kind of element to it. So it requires a lot of discipline, and it requires organizations to reach a maturity level of realizing they need to have all these things. So the size of the organization makes a big difference. Okay. Yeah, handling of emergency changes is also something that causes a huge amount of debate. Because people always have this kind of unhealthy desire to hold on to privileged accounts just in case. If something goes wrong, I need to be able to log in from home, and I need to have admin access, and I need to be able to change stuff directly in the database, and make all these things. And but what about program? How are you going to get all your approvals met? No, I'll just phone someone. Okay, then how are you going to have evidence that you got the approval? How are you going to sort out testing? What you're going to do? And there's theory which says, okay, so maybe a phone call could be okay, and then you follow up that by an email confirming this to the person who gave the approval, and then on the Monday afterwards you need full logs of everything that's happened, and you then need to actually log an incident, and somebody needs to go and check every single thing in the logs that was changed, confirm it's all okay, and then they can close the incident. Okay? But in practice, what happens? They make the phone call, they do it over the weekend, and nobody ever follows up and checks what was done, why it happened, how it happened, all of that kind of stuff. There are other more formal controls, ways of doing those kinds of things, where a person logs into a access control type system and requests emergency keys. And that then figures off some kind of workflow or SMSs to people saying, hey, this guy's just requested access to this. The manager responds back, yes, it's okay. And then the keys get generated in real time. The person can use them for that period, and then they expire immediately afterwards, and you've got a full log of everything that's happened. So in mature organizations, that's how it gets handled, as opposed to people just knowing this stuff. Okay, 3.10, systems development tools and productivity aids. Those were pretty popular like 10, 15 years ago. They seem a little bit less popular now. And that was where you had programs that generated programs for you. Okay? So back then there wasn't a lot of GUI type designs and things around, so you'd have to write all that interface code yourself and all that kind of stuff. So what these code generators would do would let you almost throw out, this is what I want my screen to look like, and these are the input fields, and that, and when you kind of clicked build, it would then go and write the actual underlying program code for you, and you would then have the program code which you would compile into your code. Okay? There's much less of a requirement for those kinds of things these days. And computer-aided software engineering, that was kind of a more advanced version of those code generators and stuff. And then fourth generation languages is just more advanced languages which have more kind of built-in default functionality. So you're not writing so many low-level kind of functions. Again, you kind of just need to go and read through it. It's almost like a history lesson in the development of IT. 3.11 looks at business improvement practices or process improvement. So all that business process re-engineering and process change projects. Okay, so just go and have a look at that. They talk about the capability maturity model. That CMMI comes up a lot in many different contexts, so it's quite important to understand what that's all about. And it's really looking at the maturity of organization. Where are you? When you start off, things are done very ad hoc. Over time, you mature it a bit and you do it in a more formal manner. Then you start having that documented, and you kind of get to that final stage of where everything's highly optimized and you're looking for continuous improvement in everything that you're doing. And that's how it comes into this process improvement practices, because now you're embedding this process improvement within your actual business processes themselves, and that aligns to that CMMI. Then those ISA standards, it's highly unlikely that they're going to ask you directly a question which says, which standard would you use for business improvement practices? And you'd need to know the number 9126. That's highly, highly unlikely. They don't ask those kind of questions. Okay? But you should know that for almost every area you're looking at, whether it's security or risk or process improvement, there will be some ISO standard which covers that. And then what are the kinds of things that are included? What are the principles behind that? So that you might need to know. Okay, 3.12, application controls. Okay. Application controls are those controls built into the application. If you do IT audit for a little while, you'll come across application control reviews. And this is kind of almost the other side of that to a degree. Now you're building an application, you've got to build those application controls into it from the start. So what are those controls? How do you do that? Okay, and you'll see those same things: input authorizations, batch controls and balancing, error reporting and handling. Okay, then your processing procedures and controls. So data validation, editing, processing controls, file control procedures, then your output controls, your business process control assurance, all that kind of stuff. So just read it and try and understand it from kind of both sides. And I think a lot of what we're studying is about that. So somebody's got to do it in a day-to-day process, and somebody else has got to audit it. Those two need to come together in a way that makes sense. Okay, so 3.13 then goes on to the next step, which is actually auditing those things. So how do you go about auditing application controls? And it gives you different methods of doing that.
This is probably quite important. Isn't that the actually as an ISO concern?
Yeah, always. Absolutely. So, they might want to ask you, how would you know, what's the difference between auditing application controls versus general controls? Okay? And which could be the best method of doing this? Or here's a particular kind of control, which would be the best method of auditing this kind of control. Okay? And apart from that, it's actually useful in your daily life. If you come across an application controls review, you need to know how to do these things anyway. Okay. And they're going to ask you things about, integrated test facilities and continuous auditing and all that. You will get questions on that.
See, this also came up in one of the questions, and it was one of the answers. It wasn't even an section. I just put it in there to try and see.
Yeah. So just read through those things and understand it. Continuous auditing and continuous monitoring also is something that a lot of organizations are doing. So it's kind of, I wouldn't quite call it a hot topic because it's a hot topic of 2 or 3 years ago, but it's still something that a lot of people are actually doing. So you need to understand all of that. Okay. Okay, so 3.14 then, auditing systems development, acquisition and maintenance. So now it's kind of taking everything that we've just covered and looking at how do you audit all those different elements of the whole thing. So how do you audit project management, feasibility studies, the requirements definitions, software acquisition processes, testing, implementation. Okay. So if you've gone through in detail those previous sections and you understand all of it, then the section on auditing it should be a whole lot easier. It is a long section. I think that's why when early on we'd said to try and get through some of these longest chapters in 1 week may not be reasonable. And there's a lot in there. And to just rush it is not really going to help you. But also, one can't then just say, I'm going to spend all the time on the chapter and not do any questions on it. That's not going to help you either.
I know, it's not a balance.
Yeah.
I'm like, I want to read it all.
You have to read it.
And you have to read it.
Yeah. But
It's interesting looking at the online forums in the CISA support group and people's questions there. And like, everybody seems to want to do like so much more than what's in the book.
Yes. They want more material. Meanwhile, you can't even
thinking, oh,
Yeah, I mean,
and I'm thinking like,
overload.
what is it? Do these people have so much time that they've been through what's in the book and they've done all the questions?
Yeah,
they're asking
now
for more on top of that? Or have they not read the book and they're just thinking, oh, I'll read the book and it's okay, I'll get there, but I want some more stuff in the meantime. And I'm not quite sure where they're at.
I think maybe they mean they want something more readable. Sometimes you're like, I was telling you, that sometimes I'm like here at the end, but I'm like, okay, what did I just read?
Yeah, it's like you lose track.
It is, and
So
you might
maybe
end up,
looking for
and you kind of read something and you
easier
read it
to-
again and you just read it a third time and you're thinking, I've just read it 3 times and I've got no idea what I've just
That's
read.
why I went to
Yeah,
bed that night.
Yeah, it happens.
And that's where you then probably trying to get through too much in a sitting. And you're better off reading for half an hour and then going and doing questions for 15 minutes and going watching an hour of TV and then coming back and repeating that and doing that all day long, then sitting there for 8 hours looking at this thing, and after 2 hours you can't remember a word you've read. So break it down into those manageable bite-sized chunks and learn about yourself. What is your concentration power like? How long is it before you actually are no longer focusing on what you're doing? And I know that if I'm just sitting reading a book, my concentration power is nowhere.
It depends what topics. Like some of these, like I found some of the governance stuff quite interesting. So I'd read 2 pages.
It
quite
depends
easy.
on the content.
It does
Yeah.
depend, and then you get to a point and you're like,
So I really struggled with this kind of material because it's fairly dry, it's fairly factual, and it's
Yeah.
not like reading a novel. I can sit and read a novel all day long, but this stuff,
it's like reading a Bible.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that's also then when hitting the questions can be a good idea. You know, if you've read a couple of pages and you're like just thinking, oh, I can't read any more of this, rather than giving up on the material, go and do a whole lot of questions. And then you get some of them wrong anyway, and then you read the answers. And reading the answers and the explanations is kind of like reading the book, but in a more appropriate context. Okay? And then when you come back and read some of the book, then it starts to make a bit more sense. You kind of go, oh, I saw that, I remember this, I remember this, I remember that. So it doesn't really matter which order you do it in, as long as you do it all and loop back and come back to it.
Sometimes I spoke because I'm like, I don't want to get this wrong. Go and like try and explain it so you understand the whole essence. Maybe if there's like a technical term I don't understand,
Yeah.
like
Google it, and then you get dictionary.com or whatever, and then you can read that, understand that. And those things, you almost want to add it to your study book. Keep like a journal type thing.
Also write notes and extra things. Or every week, at least I'm writing.
Yeah, so I always used to keep like a double A4 kind of page, and then break it up, chapter 1, whatever, and then just little notes and diagrams and things, chuck it on there. So that at the end, just before the exam, you've got 4 pages of all the kind of hot things that you need to remember. Because things that you write in the book, it's highly unlikely that you're going to page through the book and find them.
Yeah.
If you just put them into some study journal or something, you're far more likely to come back to it.
Well, just a question. I'm not sure if I've read that on somewhere or it's just my own interest. You know, when you were talking about the part where, as an auditor, assuming you're a project auditor, you evaluate the compliance to policies and procedures, like overall.
Yeah.
So if you're kind of involved in the overall project, at what point do you recommend that, or you keep on saying, guys, remember you need to comply to this policy?
Yeah, I think one needs to look at which role you're playing. So are you external audit, are you internal audit, are you project governance, what are you? Okay. And what's the objective of what you're trying to do? Okay. Because in the end, as an auditor, you should also be trying to add value to the business and keeping the business out of trouble. Okay. So the best thing is if the auditor is actually, I want to say, part of the project team. Okay. Not to have their independence compromised, but that they're constantly checking on what's going on and raising findings and getting stuff fixed, so that by the time you get to the end of the project, there shouldn't really be too many open findings left. There could be certain things that you've messed up and there's just no way to fix it, and you put it there as a learning for future projects. And the rest of the stuff should just be something that's raised is closed, just raised is closed. It's raised that your risk register hasn't been updated for 2 weeks, fine, you go and you get it updated, closed. This risk over here, you know, the risk response is not appropriate, it's not got the right owner, it's not happened yet, it's a couple of weeks down the line, fine, go and get that sorted. That's when the audit is adding value. For the auditor to go and sit in all these meetings and say nothing to anybody and issue a 100-page report at the end of the project, you're wasting everybody's time. You know, you shouldn't be paid a salary. So yeah, a lot comes down to that. And you'll find in mature project management offices, okay, they'll actually have somebody there who's allocated a governance type role. So they're not part of internal audit or whatever, they're actually within the project management office, but they are responsible for governance. And they will then be randomly choosing a project and going and looking and saying, well, here's the kind of the pack of all the documentation we'd expect to see in place. Here's all the checklists that should be there. Let's go and review a risk register and an issue log, and let's go and look at some minutes and see when was, okay, so there were some risks raised in this project management meeting. When did those actually arrive on the risk register? Let's look at last week's risk register. Let's look at this week's one. Okay? And you'll find some project managers, man, they can be frustrating. The stuff they do is just dumb. Okay? So you go to a project management meeting one week, and there's all a lot of discussion. There's a risk register. People talk about it. They want some stuff added and removed. You go next week, and the risk register looks absolutely nothing like last week's one. Last week's one was in Excel. Now they've got it in PowerPoint. Okay? And last week's one had 15 risks. Now they've only got 2. And you're kind of going, well, hang on, we had 15 last week. And people are giving responses and stuff. Where are these things gone? No, we think they're resolved now. It's like, no, you can't. You need them there because you might have a response in there to address it at this point in time, but that could reopen. If that response is no longer sufficient to address that risk, it's entirely possible to reopen. So it's best you have it on a spreadsheet or some kind of tool where you can keep track of these things, and you can reassess where they're at. And you can't be starting from scratch every damn time. Okay? So that's where the maturity of the project managers, them working according to a methodology, using the right templates, all of that is critically important. So, yeah.
Just a bit off topic, going up to chapter 2 or so.
Yeah.
About SLAs. So, if I kind of think of it, an SLA is usually dictated, and the term of reference, whatever, is dictated by the service provider. But most of the time, like, what we require is like basically the organization that's taking on the service has certain requirements that they would like in the SLA.
Yeah.
But like if you look, okay, say if you take yourself out of an organization, like an individual, if I'm taking out signing up for a contract, a self-mode contract, so they'll basically give me the terms of the contract. So my hands are basically tied. I can't go and dispute that. No, I don't agree with this, and I don't agree with this, because you won't get the contract. So it's more like if you're a small organization or a medium organization, you don't really have an option when you're signing that contract.
Well, you still have some choices.
Yeah.
Okay? So yes, absolutely. The larger the organization,
auditing, it's like a bit too late at that point to say, okay, you've got this contract in place, but it doesn't adhere to this, and this, but you already like.
Yeah, so there's a whole lot of different issues that you've put in there. Okay? So the first is that for large organizations, yes, they're going to have much more buying power, and it's far more likely that service providers will customize the SLAs to meet the requirements of the large organization.
Because it's high value, big money.
Yeah.
So but
that's not always the case. So you look at somebody like Telkom, for example. If you want to buy a wide area network, Telkom have their standard SLAs, and it's take it or leave it. Okay? They're not going to, you say to them, I want a 98% availability. They'll say to you, well, it's a fixed line, so it has a 95% availability, or it's a, it's a 2 meg, I don't know, whatever line, and it's best effort. You're going to go, well, we need more than best effort. Tough. You want our service, you take it. Okay? So if you go back to where we had it, so you kind of look at, let's say, that infrastructure development stuff. Okay, so what are the functional requirements? The functional requirements say we need something that's 99% or 99.5% available. When you start doing that matching of that to potential service providers, well, clearly then Telkom is not going to cut it for you, so you're not going to use Telkom. Or you'll have to come up with an alternate design that says, well, I'm going to get one line from Telkom over here, and I'm going to, in my router, put a 3G SIM card that then uses MTN as a backup, so that normally I will get 2 meg of bandwidth from Telkom. In the event that goes down, I'm now going to have to pay 3G data rates, but I'll have an LTE connection through MTN, so the latency is a bit higher, but I've still got all the bandwidth I need. But now I'm paying 100 Rand a meg as opposed to 1,000 Rand a month. So best I get that damn thing fixed quickly, otherwise it's going to cost me a fortune, but my business will keep on running. Or, well, this is a small little branch office, and you know what? It's not actually worth me paying this extra amount for this. Or So you've got to design it up front to meet your requirements. You can't just blindly say, well, oh, well, you know what, Telkom's not going to give it to me. I'm just going to have to accept what they give me. And now your business goes bankrupt because your offices are down because the demand has gone down. You have to work around those things. Those are the restrictions and limitations that you must design your way around. Okay? And if you've got a tender for a WAN and you know you need 98%, then you put 98% as your requirement. But you don't put it as an optional requirement. You've got to put it as a compulsory requirement. Because it's no good saying, well, okay, Telkom don't meet that, so they'll get 0 points for that. But they still get enough points on the other elements that they go through to the second round and their price is lowest, so they win the tender. And you're going, but I can't use them. Okay, you put that in your compulsory requirements. And they don't meet the compulsory requirements, they get chucked out. And then it comes down to, okay, we've got Dark Fiber Africa, we've got Vodacom and Neotel and some other providers, and those guys now do meet those requirements. Okay? But you've got to do it up front. If you now don't do it up front, and you now go and sign with Telkom, another auditor comes to you and says, hey, you don't have an SLA in place. You need to go and ask business, what do they need? Oh, okay, we go to business, ask them, what do you need? No, 99%. Oh, okay, go to Telkom. Telkom, you need to give us 99%. They just laugh at you. So you'll never get it right that way. But then you've got to look and say, well, when does that contract come up for renewal? And at the time of renewal, best you make a plan now. And don't wait till the day on which the thing's got to be renewed. Start planning 6-8 months before they get the business requirements, take it to market, so that 3 months before the thing's up for renewal, you've already got a new vendor and you've got a transition plan in place. How are you going to move from one to the other? Okay. So one must always look at that. Your hands are not quite as tight as you think they are. But somebody's got to make the effort to go through that process. And then you've got to manage the thing afterwards. It's also no good signing up for an SLA and saying, oh, it's great, I've signed up, I'm going to get my 99%. And nobody ever measures it. Nobody ever holds them to account. So in the month they give you 98%, ooh, there's no penalty. Nobody says anything. Oh, okay, well, we don't have to worry too much about this. Don't call the guys out after hours and pay them overtime rates and things. We'll just fix it when it gets there because they're not checking it. That's what happens. So, yeah. Any other questions around this or any of the previous chapters?
This is a tough one.
Just thinking, yeah.
Still catching up on the
roles
content.
and responsibilities. Sorry, I also had one. I've been doing mainly questions.
That's
so I'll
fine.
go through the chapter.
So what you normally do is if you've been doing questions, okay, those questions that you get wrong, just like take a screenshot of
Yeah, I
it,
was
tuck it
telling
into
him.
Word, and then we can discuss it.
Now I know.
Okay.
Now I know. So in terms of change management, one thing that I've kind of noticed is that I'm talking change in terms of change to the business, saying
So business change as opposed to program change.
yes,
Yeah.
as opposed to what I've noticed is that it doesn't really feature in any of the. So whose responsibility would you say?
Any large project should have a business change element to it. If it doesn't, the project will fail. And I've seen that many times. Okay? You can build the best new tool, product, service in the world. If nobody uses it, it's a failure. And when you come back to your benefits realization, it'll be a failure. Okay? I'll give you an example. We put in a system that allowed users to do self-service resets. They could reset their own password. Okay? If somebody forgets their password, they phone the service desk, you get billed a certain amount per call to the service desk, 100 Rand a call, whatever it might be. Okay? You can look at the stats and you see, well, hey, you know what? We're having 8 or 10,000 password resets in a month, 100 Rand a password reset. We're spending like 1.5 million, 2 million Rand a year on password resets. Okay? We can go and get a tool for 500,000 Rand, put it in. Hey, we can save ourselves 700,000 Rand a year. Awesome. Okay, this sounds good. Put the business case together and you look at it and then you kind of go, oh, okay, hang on. To make this thing work, I need 40% of my people to now use my system and not phone in anymore. Because if less than 40% phone in, I'm now paying for the system, plus I'm paying for those calls. It's actually going to cost me more. Now I used to, well, how the heck am I going to get 40% or more of people to do this thing? Okay? Training and program change. So now you need a change manager who's going to say, okay, we need a campaign, we need emails, we need banners, we need this, we need that, we need to pull stats, we need to train the service desk. Every time somebody phones in, they say, no, you can't phone me anymore. I need you to go to this page and do this and register and do that. Yeah? So that's where the change management comes into it. And if you don't have that, your projects will fail time after time after time.
I guess as a, say you're an internal auditor, you're really involved in that project, you can also always put it up. That we must put it as one of the risks, the fact that...
Yeah, so that would be one of the risks, and it would be in the business case, and it would be there as part of your value realization. This is what we need. So the risk is that then we don't get this many people, and what do we put as a mitigation to the risk? Okay, we're going to have training, we're going to have this, we're going to have the change manager. And then as the project's executing, you could be looking at it and going, well, hang on, we said these are the things we're doing to mitigate that risk. Where are they? Are they now in the project plan? Yeah, okay, they're in the project plan. Cool, so we're now going to manage it through the project plan. And this is slipping, that's slipping. What are the critical success factors? How do we measure, take on numbers, etc., etc.? You know, so one has to look at all those elements, but it is critically important. And within an IT function, you should actually have a change management function, and then you should have change managers allocated to projects to do that stuff. You know, they can make sure that IT people, we don't draw pretty things and have nice readable documents and all of that. The change manager comes in it with a different view. You know, they know that if you put 1,000 pages on or 1,000 words on a page and you have its PowerPoint slide and you send it off, nobody's going to read a word. Okay, they'll put a nice big picture with 3 words on there that'll get the message across. You know, it's that kind of stuff. So you need the people who've got the right skills to do those things and get those messages across. Any other questions, issues? Yeah.
So a lot of this chapter is to do with like project management.
Completely, because that's often where things fall down.
Yeah. There's a lot of like project management methodology, like scheduling.
Absolutely. The project manager is such an important person in all of this. A poor project manager is going to end up with your project failing. Something else I came across, which was interesting and amusing, is if you go to this website, isect.com, and you go and look at the frequently avoided questions about IT auditing. Okay, so they've got this like little clickable mind map, and they've got all sorts of questions there, and then they give you answers and stuff. And the guy writes it in a very amusing way, but the stuff is valid and correct. And so if you kind of bored and you're tired of reading the book or something, go and have a look at this. There's some interesting insights and information in there. And it's reasonably up to date. So,
what is one of them?
What qualification do I need?
Published on www.
So we can load it up quick if you want to actually see some of it.
Ah,
So let's just make it human so you can read some of these things. So,
Auditing that.
yeah.
Yeah, what that one?
Okay. So what is auditing then? You can see.
some of us did it.
So what is computer auditing about? What's it known as? Isn't it really just accounting? Is it anything to do with counting PCs? What are the computer auditors audit against? How does audit fit in with governance, risk, and compliance? Auditing is all about compliance, right? So how long does an audit take? So you can just, let's take one of these and go and see what it's all about. Okay, so what is auditing then? Okay. And then he kind of explained it to you. So how do I scroll across? Then IT auditing is a branch of general auditing concerned primarily with governance, risk control, and compliance in relation to IT, that is, information and communications technologies. Okay. IT auditors are interested in how IT systems, networks, and peripherals, plus related procedures for designing, developing, testing, configuring, and implementing, using, managing, and maintaining them, handle risks to the organization. We spend the bulk of our audit time dealing with the people rather than IT. Being able competently to audit the IT is what sets us apart from the riffraff and hoi polloi. Like many IT professionals, we may at times appear to view people as peripheral devices responsible for generating inputs and consuming outputs, and as the principal generators of flaws, bugs, and errors. But that's a cynical perspective. Okay? So you can see that it's written in quite a fun way, but what they're saying is valid. So what do IT auditors actually do? And then they kind of go through different elements of what you do, and then what it's called. And okay, so what's auditing then? And then they talk about the different things. And you've got to be independent. You examine things with records as other information. So there's a lot of different elements to this. Like I say, it's written in a fairly light-hearted, amusing way that's actually far more readable than a lot of the material in the book, and it doesn't contradict what's in the book. So again, if you get to a point where you're just struggling to go through material in the book, then pop along here, read some of this stuff, and you can kind of come back to it. And there's a lot of material there. They've put a lot of effort into it.
Yeah, it's quite a bit that's just on one part.
Yeah, I mean, you can look there on the scroll bar. You can see
quite,
just how much is in this thing.
Yeah.
Jeez.
It's
That's
huge.
all this guy does.
Yeah. And like something. So what's cool? IT auditors are security architects. Yeah. So yeah, there's pros and cons to all things. Okay. And there's some amusing things in there. IT auditors are thick-skinned, tough, and resilient. Yeah? You have to be, otherwise you won't survive. Okay.
I say so. Okay.
Security architects are sensitive, approachable, and responsive. Okay. So you got to read some of that stuff. It's fun, but mostly true.
Yeah.
And then why do IT auditors give us such a hard time?
Yeah, like,
When they say, why do you want that?
yeah.
I'm like, okay. Just they make it good. I'm like, okay.
I also want it.
No, even when you explain what you're trying to do, but I still don't get it right.
I think they love, clients love being difficult. And I think it's because they don't fully understand.
Or sometimes it's because they fully understand and they kind of want to just get one over the auditor.
Yeah,
and it's this game they play.
Yes,
Yeah.
sometimes they love it. They love doing that.
And just play nice and we'll get this over with quickly. And sometimes they're just drawn out.
Yeah, and they will pride themselves on the fact that they've managed to hide all these findings from the auditor.
Yeah.
And when they
I can
eventually get
imagine.
found out, management want to know, well, how come it's so bad this year and it wasn't and it's no, you guys have been hiding it from the auditor successfully for 5 years.
Yeah.
And then
They do ask.
And it makes the auditors think, well, why didn't you pick it up? Meanwhile,
to figure out last
because
year.
if you get told certain information, that's it. You can't really, or if they can happen to manipulate the information that they give you.
and they do. They will often manipulate the source of the information.
Yes.
So, we want to know about all the changes that have happened. Yeah, no, okay, yeah, you get that from the change control committee. Okay, so get the minutes of the change control committee. Here's all the changes that have gone through the change control committee. That's not all the
Yeah.
changes,
Yes.
okay? And the problem ones are the ones that haven't gone through them.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's like, whoa, no, I don't want to use that as my starting point. I need to use something else. And then it's like, no, you can't use that. Why not?
It's
Yeah,
gonna
drill
take
down.
time. It's gonna take time to get there.
Absolutely, it's like,
It'll take forever.
that's okay. I've got all the time in the world. I'll take my team off site and I'll come back when you're ready. You can explain to management why the audit is delayed by 2 weeks.
We had a client who we asked for something, just like a user access form, and they obviously didn't have it. There's the manager, so I asked one of the IT technicians there, he obviously then emailed his manager, and then the manager emailed us with the trail below the stick. And in the trail, the guy was saying, the auditors are asking for whoever's form. Should I just create one? No. Promise you. Then it actually turned into quite a big thing because we're like, you can't manipulate.
There's no integrity within.
You can't just create information upon request. test, and it actually went up to our director and we got involved because it was actually quite a serious thing. But we're like, maybe next time don't leave your trail in the email.
Yeah, create a new one.
Create a new email.
And you know, if you want to do stuff like that, it's better to have a form than to have no form. Okay, so if you didn't have one in the past and you create it now and you get the managers to sign it off, that's fine, do that. But put today's date on it. Okay? Because if you put today's date on it, then there's honesty through the whole thing. We didn't have it, we do it, we put today's date on it, look, the manager signed off, that proves to you that that person should have that access. Therefore, it's a documentation issue, it's not a control failure.
Yeah.
And yes, we'll do it better next time. Give us the finding, we'll accept it, and we'll say that we've resolved it. Okay?
Not quite as simple as that.
Sometimes it's not. No.
Because especially in the public sector, like
Yeah.
when a finding comes, it's a big thing. For them, it's the
just
end of
because
the
they
world
need to
because
answer, especially if it's like similar findings over and they start getting red faces. And
Yeah,
then they need
if they've had the same finding 3 years in a row, well, you know, then it's not really going to help them either.
hate
But
finding.
the smart thing is worse is when you find a person trying to find their own battles using the auditors, saying, yes, you must raise this. And it's time that the management see.
Yes,
It's
I've had
done
that.
like that.
It's like,
Yes,
oh, yeah,
yes.
so I've had this issue with this, and I'm like,
And I've been raising it over
I've no
and over,
evidence, I
and
just
they
have to
can't
watch
listen to me.
status.
No, but you know, you must look at it also from their point of view.
Yeah.
Very often, something that's written in a management letter coming from the auditor will get face time and will get fixed within an organization. Somebody internally saying it again and again and again will actually not get anywhere.
No, actually,
So-
I do agree
But
with
it
that. in a
depends
sense
what
because-
is it as well.
Sure, you
can't
don't want to
necessarily
get involved in a political
You've
thing
been
where it's a
waiting here
vindictive thing.
whatsoever, and they pay you so this. And if you raise that because sometimes they will do like flops intentionally so that you will raise that as a finding, then they will see the need of actually taking them permanently. I mean, really, you're actually fighting for your own benefits, but you're using me to do that.
Yes, so one does have to be
It's a report
careful.
on the risk, but not on just because you're temporarily and you have to come here and you come only twice a week. This is why there's so many. I mean, for those 2 days, you're supposed to make sure that you deliver.
Yeah, completely.
But no, I do understand we've got like on one client, there's like one IT manager and you know, gets resistance from the business for certain things. And the only way for him to get anywhere is actually, okay, we'll put that in the report, you know, if like, there's terminations process problem, you know, he's like, I'm battling to do this, you
Yeah.
know, it's
HR don't want to send me
it's
these things or
inconsistent.
managers.
I mean, that's the main thing, but no, like, well, let's write it, you know, and then HR must comment or whatever, and to try and help him. Yeah.
And that's a way of trying to also get through to IT people that audit doesn't have to always be this negative thing. Audit can actually add value in their
Yeah.
lives. Okay?
It is a
And,
good way to.
and if you can get that kind of turnaround and attitude, then the audits don't always have to be these hugely negative things. But it's an ongoing battle to get to that point.
Yeah.
And then if something goes wrong in the audit and, you know, you report a finding that 1 out of 20 or 40 that's, you know, not quite right or something, oh boy, then you're back down to persona non grata again.
But you find that when you go into places where they introduce IT governance, they're more welcoming to auditors.
If it's coming from the top,
Yes.
Yeah. absolutely.
That's what I've kind of noticed.
That comes down to more like the maturity of the organization.
Yeah.
As they mature and as they put in structure, it's just like,
Yeah, I always try and like explain why we're doing it.
Most of the people that hate their own jobs are as well, because they think you're there to actually pressure
To like
or to prove otherwise that they want to be.
or to
If
find
they-
their fault.
If they genuinely aren't doing their jobs though, and, you
Yeah.
know, then they're going to be on the
You're not there
defensive.
for that.
So that's the thing. If they are doing it well, it's like, yeah, it was done this.
Like in departments, you find like an IT manager, been called an IT manager, but when you look at the background whatsoever, I mean, he has absolutely nothing to do with IT. And then he will tell you that when you ask like the termination process, no, I get the form, I take the form and I scan it through to CISA. Oh, okay. How do you know whether they yes, if the user is intimate, oh, they will come back to me and tell me that the use has been terminated. But why are you sitting there to forward the forms? Because it can be done even, you don't even need like a help desk technician whatsoever to forward the forms. So you're there to scan through the forms. And then now and then you call and find out if have they terminated the use or not. I mean, really. Then you call yourself an IT manager.
Oh, yeah, but there are, I mean,
Public sector.
finance managers becoming IT managers. Which I'm like,
Yes.
I don't see how this works because,
It's
what
not-
do you know?
It's not controlled.
It's not that
It's really
uncommon,
controlled,
actually.
it's You're like, okay, what is controlled here?
Everything's controlled by the IT manager until there's problems. Then everything's controlled by CISA.
Sure. No, that's what, don't ask me to sit up. Oh,
Yeah.
do you even look what they do? No, I don't have an access to that. Oh, okay.
Okay.
So are you the middleman here then?
So prep for next week is basically just to finish what you haven't finished this week in terms of a chapter and do as many questions as you can. And then next week we will focus on those questions and what's working, what's not working, what you're struggling with.
I'm also going to be missing next week.
Okay.
So I'm taking leave, so
Send through your question.
I'll send you my questions. Yeah. I think I'll be driving, so I won't be able to actually.
So you need somebody else to drive so that
I think
you can
last
watch.
Yeah, I'll like just go on my phone.
Get a big data
Some nice
bubble.
questions
Yeah.
with, I think we did have questions.
They were the last ones.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there were some nice questions.
I didn't put too many.
Hey, I just started this.
Sure, some of those questions are hard.
Yeah, they were like very confusing.
But hopefully by the time you've kind of been through the discussion, that makes a little
Yeah.
bit more sense.
Yeah.
It's really frustrating because you feel like you've just wasted your time and if you actually understand the content better. Meanwhile, you're not understanding anything if you can't answer that question.
I mean, I sat reading, okay, one answer given page.
And I feel like I'm moving very slow because I will go back to trying to judge why I didn't get it right. And then I get like new information when I look at the answer now, why they say the answer is correct. So I go back again. So I feel like instead of covering 10
But you are
pages,
actually
I'm
learning.
covering
Yeah.
only 3 pages now.
As long as you get through lots of those questions, you very much
It's
are
like
learning and you
whole
are
thing, like,
moving
you know what, I'll
forward.
never finish this school thing. But it just doesn't feel right to pass through and you haven't
There's
understand.
still quite a while to go.
The thing is that one needs to get through to the end of the book and then come back.
And then
And
see
not-
the whole.
Don't get to the end of the book, because if you don't get to the end of the book, then you're in trouble.
I feel like
It's not
time
till
is no
struggling
longer on
read.
my side.
Sorry?
Time is no longer on my side.
Well, we've still got 2 months
Still got
before
2
the
months.
exam.
Maybe
2 questions.
And we're busy with chapter 3. Once you've done chapter 3, you're kind of like halfway through it. You know, if you go back to,
Yeah, we actually
that?
maybe halfway. Well, we basically.
look at that there, okay? 33, 46, 78. By the time you've done that, you've got 70, 50, you've got 126 pages left, okay? You're more than halfway through the book by the time you've done this chapter.
2 months, it's just called 50 days. So if you read, it's 380 divided by 50. That's only 7 a day. If you want to get through the whole book.
But again, if you break it up, if you read 2 pages in the morning and 2 pages at night and 2 pages at lunch,
Even during the day.
Lunch is
I find that
actually a good
helps.
time.
No, I find that helps.
Just have a break
seriously,
from work.
you only need to do
and
like 2 pages, 2 pages, 2 pages, okay? Break it 2 at a time and then it'll go through.
That's 2 or 6, yeah, a day.
But one thing I would like to say, from today, I was just reading things. I wasn't really like nicely connecting from the task statement to.
It makes a lot of sense.
It makes
as
a lot of
task.
sense. I'm like, I was just checking now how it's all interconnected.
And it is all interconnected, but when you sit with the book and you look there and you look at these are the task statements and these are knowledge statements, you're looking at them thinking,
You don't-
why are they even telling me these things? Okay, because it doesn't actually
Yeah.
make
But
sense.
for me, they only make sense after I have read.
Yes, it's good to go back to them at the end. Yeah, okay, I see how it all fits together. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
Good to see you back again.
And welcome to me.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Better late than never.
And we'll see you next week.
Don't worry, we'll throw the party next week.
Thank you very
Okay,
much.
So
Justin.
cool.
represent me next week.
Cheerio, everybody.
Must do Christian.
Yes. No, I'll